Hello everyone. Can you please confirm that you can hear me and that the voice is fine and the quality is good? All right. So as always, we wait a few minutes and then we start today's session. Hello everyone. I hope you had a nice week, a nice and productive week. So yeah, and welcome to today's session. I think today is the fourth session of our bootcamp, and today we will start doing some action. And yep, so I'm really excited to start this with you. So yeah, we will wait just another 2 minutes and then we will start our session for today. And then as always, so like in the beginning we will start the session. I will show you like what we will do today, and by the end of the session we will have our discussion, and you will have the time to ask your questions, and I will answer all your questions all together. All right, so another almost 2 minutes and then we can start. So can you hear me well, right? So just confirm for me. So like everything is fine, so I don't go start doing the session and then I find out that there is an issue or something like that. Just write me in the chat if everything is fine and if you can hear me well. So yeah, that would be good. Okay, perfect. All right, so since everything is fine, I guess now we can start. All right, so what we will do today, first we will spin up the project. So we will create the repository, we will set up the project, and also I will show you how we, so like we will create the backend project. I will show you how we can set up our working environment and all that goes with that. So yeah, this is how we will proceed for today, and then we will start creating and implementing the entities, the relationships, based on the diagram that we defined together the last time. All right, so the first thing, here I'm on my GitHub page, or I'm on my GitHub account. So like to access it or like to find it, just search for this username. So, or like you can go to github.com/ali-bouali. So like slash this username right here, and you will find my page, and then you can click on repository. So you can find the repository that we will create today, as well as the other repositories that are public. So you can also, like, if you need something from there, or like if you want to check some code, you can find everything in there. So the first thing I will click on this button right here, and then I will create a new repository. So I will call my repo game store, for example. Let's call it game store application. Like this, it makes more sense. So here, maybe this is the repository for the game store application, implemented during the boot camp, and here I will mention YouTube members only. So like this is just some description for the repo. I will make it public. Also, I will add a git ignore. So here, let's say, so here maybe we need Java, and I think also we can select IntelliJ. Nope. Okay, so for this one, maybe let's just keep it this way, or maybe I will just remove. Okay, so let's leave it this way. It's not a problem. So for the license, I can make it an Apache license 2.0. So like this means that this project is open source and anyone can use it, and you don't need to do anything. So I will just click on create repository. So this is our repo, and then we will add. Okay, so let's add now a README file. So this is a basic README file. We will update it later because this is very important. I'm talking about the README file. So like having a README file is very important for our project. So why it is important? Because when someone accesses your project and he wants to see what do we have there, or like what the project is about, so the first thing that he will get in touch with is the README file. So like it, as much as you can detail or like put information into this README file is recommended. So like what I mean in here. So for example, how to set up the project, how the project, like first of all, like a global idea about the project, what it does, or what it's about, and then how to set up the project. So for example, if you have a backend, front end, different APIs and different configurations and so on and so forth. So you need also to put some details and description how to set up the project. So like for example, if you are applying for a job and you put one repo, or like you put, for example, your GitHub account as a reference, so the interviewer can see or like can check what you already developed or implemented. So for example, if he finds this application interesting and he wants to run it, or like he wants to give it a try. So if it is not online, so like if it is online, we can just have a link, or like put a link to have like a kind of playground or something like that, that the interviewer can try the application and see how it works. Otherwise, you can also add steps how to enable or how to make this application work on a local environment. All right, so now what we will do, so now our repository is ready. We created the necessary basic files, the git ignore, the license, and the readme file. So the license, you do not need to include it if your project is private and you don't want to make it public for everyone. But since this is a bootcamp, and anyone of you or like from the community can access this repo, so that's why I added a license in here. So if they clone the project, so it's gonna be totally fine and totally okay for them. And as well as the readme file is the one I just explained. So now how to proceed. So first I will clone this project. So like we have two methods, whether to start from creating the repository and then clone it and then add the projects, add the code and so on and so forth, or start from your local and then push the code. So like you create a repository and then you push your code. So we did it on the other way around. So first of all, I will copy this SSH link. So to be able to use the SSH, you need to set up an SSH key in your configuration. So to do that, you just need to go in here. So it's not mandatory for this, by the way, but it's just some information I want to share with you. So here you just go to sorry, not the profile, but the settings in here, and then you will have SSH and GPG keys. Just click on it and you will have all the details and all the information how to proceed with that. All right, so let's go back to our repo in here, and again, just to make sure, I will copy this one, and now I will come back to my IntelliJ. So now I assume that everyone has the license. So what I will do a new project from here, but it's clone a repository. So here I will maybe change the location. Just a second. So I will put it in. All right, so I will put it in here, and now I will just paste the URL that we just copied. And then all we need to do is to click on clone. So now it's cloning the repository, and I will click on trust project. So now I have my project ready to use. So as you can see here, we have the gitignore file with the Java configuration. We have the license, which is auto-generated from GitHub, and we have our readme file, and this is what we wrote. So maybe let's fix this typo. And now the first thing that I will do, I will create a folder, and I will call it resources. All right. So this resources folder. So here I will choose the option to always add. So like this, I don't need to every time to do a git add before committing. So for the resources, I will put the diagrams that we have here. So I mean this file right here, and also I will put everything, or like every documentation or kind of resources that we will need for during the implementation of this application. All right, so the next step is, so this one we will update it by the end of the session, since we still need to use this diagram, and we might change something or add something, so I will add it by the end of this video. All right, so now what we will do, the first thing is we will go to start.spring.io. So in this way, we will create our project. So I'm gonna make it black, maybe it's better. So now we will use Maven as a project, like the tool that will handle the dependencies, the build, and like all the configurations of our project. We'll be using Java for our project. And here we see that the current latest version of Spring Boot is 3.4.0, and we have the 337 snapshot, and 341 is also a snapshot. So we will use 3.4.0. So here now we will set up, or like we will add some project metadata. So here I will call it like the group com.alibu, and here I will call it game store for the artifact. All right, so here like it will give us the name game store, and I will add API to this one just for the project name, but the artifact it will be game store, or maybe let's make it game store API, so it's totally fine. All right. And now, as you can see, so here we have the description. So here, let's call it the Spring Boot project for the game store API. So these are just some information, or like meta information that we will use. And then we have a package name. So the package name, it will be automatically the concatenation of the group and the artifact ID. So as you can see here, we have here com.alibu, and then we have the artifact. So here, just to make it simple, because I personally don't like having packages with dashes or like with long names, so I will just call it store, since we know that this is our game store API. So the base package, I will call it com.alibu.store. And now we will need to add some dependencies. So the first thing we will start with is the Lombok. So Lombok is a library which helps to reduce boilerplate code. So for example, if we just using some annotations, it will help us generate getters, setters, constructors, required constructors, and so on and so forth. So like it generates a bunch of code out of the box, so we don't need to increase the boilerplate code or like this way. So like this is why we need Lombok. So then we will need our Spring Data JPA, since we will use a relational database as we have here. So like it will not be no SQL database, but it's going to be a relational database. So we'll need Spring Data JPA. So when we select something like database, we need also to select the driver for that. So for this bootcamp, I usually prefer using Postgres SQL. But for example, if you want to use another one, like for example MySQL or something like that, all you need to do is to select the correct driver that you want to use. Okay, so the next thing, since we are implementing an API, I need to integrate also the Spring Web dependency. So here we will have Spring Web, and later on we will add other dependencies when the time comes, when we want to implement, for example, the WebSocket, when we want to implement the RabbitMQ connection, and so on and so forth. So now we are setting up the basic project with the basic dependencies. All right, also I will add my Spring Boot validation. So this, like the validation is, we need it when we want to validate data or beans or classes and so on and so forth. So I will add it from now. And then, okay, so all right, so I changed my mind. I will remove validation and I will add it when we come to the validation part, since like just for you, so you do not forget that you need to add these dependencies or dependency, or that the dependency is required to make the validation work. All right, so now here we have two options. So first we can generate the project or click on explore. So like when you click on explore, it will give you an overview about the pom.xml file and with the different dependencies that we added. So as you can see here, we have our Spring Data JPA, Spring Web, Postgres SQL, and Project Lombok. And also, of course, like when we add the web and so on and so forth, we will have automatically the test dependencies. So for testing, when it comes to the testing part, we will also add some other things, because as I mentioned, we will be working with test containers to implement the end-to-end tests. Also, we will implement the unit test and so on and so forth. So like every time we come to a part, we will also see what are the required dependencies that we need for that one. And here as you can see, we have the structure, or like this is the base package, com.alibu.store, and this is the main application, or like the main class to run the application. And here we have our application.properties or YAML, and here we have the static and templates, and of course we have at the same time we have the test resources. So now all I need to do is to click on download. So I will download it in here, and then all I need to do is to copy this file. So I'm gonna copy it in here and then just paste it into my workspace, and I will show you how to do that. Just a second, I will just put it in the right place. All right, so here, this is my workspace. So I will just paste the project in here. All right, so and then later on I will delete this zip file. So now all I need to do is to extract it in my working space. So here I have my project, and as you can see, I have the source, the pom.xml, and so on and so forth. So now I can go ahead and delete this zip file, since I don't want to synchronize it in my code base or in my project. So here you see that we have this file right here, but this file, so for now it's not recognized as a project. So how to do? So like the approach, by the way, so the approach that I'm using in here is called monorepo approach. So monorepo means that we want to have only one repository that contains everything. So like it will contain the front end, the back end, the listener and everything that goes with. So like instead of having a repository for each part, since this is the main application or the whole application, so I prefer to have everything in one place instead of navigating or having multiple instances of my IDE running just to switch between the front end and the back end. So it's just an approach, it's just an idea. If you like it, just go ahead. If you don't, you can also create a separate repository for each project. All right, but for now we will continue this way. So here, as I mentioned, when you just copy paste or extract the project that we just created, it will appear in this way. So what I mean in here, so for example, when we go to the Java project, so this one, it's not even recognized as a Java project. Why? Because we did not import it. So here we are talking about the IDE configuration. All right. So this project is not yet imported, and even you see here that IntelliJ is considering this project as just a structure of folders. So how to do? Just we go to new, and then we have a file. Sorry, first we go to file and then new, and then we have module from existing source. So this means that we want to import a project from an existing source. All right, so I just need to navigate and find my project. So it's gonna be in here. All right, so now all I need to do, just navigate to the Game Store API and select the pom.xml file and click on open. When you click on open, first you will see that now it starts reading the Maven projects, and then it will start downloading all the dependencies that we included in the pom.xml. And here, the most important part is that you will see a Maven menu or a Maven view getting opened in here. So this means that our project now is recognized as a Maven project. All right. So now if I click, for example, or on reload on all Maven projects, so it will start reloading or like enabling or downloading the dependencies. So like you did not see that it's downloading the dependencies since I already have the dependencies cached in my .m2 folder. So that's why it was not downloading it immediately. So like it was just checked, so everything is fine. So it doesn't need to download anything. All right, so now as you can see, now we have the annotations, we can navigate and we can see the source code and so on and so forth. By the way, before we start, when you want to check the code for a given annotation or a given class, and you see this option right here, download sources, I highly recommend that you always click on the download, because it will give you the full documentation, and you can read the documentation, and also you can see the implementation if for example, because this one is just an interface, but for a classes, for example, you will see the full implementation of that. All right, so the first thing that I would like to do is using the YAML representation. So I get a lot of questions, why using YAML against properties, what are the advantages or disadvantages of this over that. So there is no advantages, there is no disadvantages for one over the other. It's just a representation. All right, so for me, I prefer having a hierarchy of properties instead of having the same property or like the properties with the full path duplicated. So for example, if I need spring.dataSource for example .url and so on and so forth, so I need to put it in this way, and then I need to do again spring.dataSource username, for example, and the username, and the same, for example, for the password, and so on and so forth. So here, so this is how we write it in the YAML in the properties representation. But when we change this file into a YAML file, so all I need to do is to just rename it. And to rename it, you can use whether YML or just YAML like this. So like both of them work. And now if I want to add my spring.dataSource.username, URL and password, all I need to do is to do spring.dataSource.url, and now when I hit enter, it's gonna be like a hierarchy right this way. So I can put the URL in here, and now I can also add my user, sorry, not Hikari, but just username and password. So for me, for me, this representation is much more readable, and it's easier to identify where I need to change or like where I need to add something. All right. So that's the only reason behind using a YAML representation. So now, before we move on and we start creating the classes and the entities and so on and so forth, the first thing that I would do is to commit these changes. All right, I would like to commit these changes. So here, I will also teach you how to use IntelliJ to commit the changes. So here you have a commit menu right here. So here, first you will see that we have, or like we introduced some changes to the git ignore, to the application.yaml readme file, and so on and so forth. So these are by default synchronized, so that's why they appear into changes. And then we have unversioned files. All right, so we have unversioned files in here. So these unversioned files means that they are not available, or they are not committed yet to the git stage. All right, so and the difference you see here, that when we change a file, or like when we update a file, so it's gonna be or like it will appear in blue, and if with a new file it will be in green, and if the file is not synchronized, so it will appear in red. So this means that when we push the code, this one, or like this part right here, it will not be considered or taken into consideration when we commit the changes. Also, there is one option. When you click on the eye icon here, you can group by directory. So when you group it by directory, it will give you the same representation as you have in the project right here. So here you can see that you have this .idea. So this one we want to ignore. We don't want to have this one. And then we have this game store API source main application. I really don't know why this one is synchronized, because normally it should be part of the new project, and the same in here. So like for the Spring Boot project, we need to commit everything. All right, so now I will just select all these files, and then I will just right click and then add to VCS. All right, so when I do add to VCS, now you will see that everything appears in the changes. All right, so in the changes in here, so we have this idea, so we will ignore it in a few seconds, and we have now the game store, we have the wrapper, we need to keep it, we have the source main, and we have the Java file, and also we have the application.yaml, as well as the structure, or like the test resources. So the first thing that I want to do is to go to this git ignore file, and here at the end, or like at any place, so or even in the beginning, so here I will just add a comment, so ignoring .idea folder. All right, and here all I need to do is to choose my .idea folder. So this one, so like what we put in this git ignore file. So for example, here when I add star.class, so this means anything, or like any file having the extension .class will not be taken into consideration when I want to commit the changes and push the changes. All right, the same if we want to ignore a folder, for example. Here, so here we see also that you have this resource folder, and just I will add some test.txt file just in here. And here, by the way, when you use IntelliJ and when you get this pop-up, do you want to add the following to Git folder, you can click on add, or you can click on don't ask and choose one of the options. If you click or like if you choose add, so the add option, it will automatically add the new files that you create automatically to Git. If you click cancel and you have this one checked, this means that it, like from now on, it will always ignore the file. So for me, I want to click add. So now you see that this test.txt is now in green. All right, so for example, now if I want to ignore this test, or like this resource, so here all I need to do is I want to ignore a slash resource. So when I click, so when I add this one right here, and now when I go back to commit and actualize, so like and refresh in here, so it should ignore all everything that is inside these resources. So now, all right, maybe 1 star. I think it's not just refreshing. All right, so it seems maybe Okay, maybe something is wrong. Maybe, I don't know. Let me try to refresh. Okay, anyways. I don't want to waste a lot of time in here. So this way, when we, or like what we can do, like we can do this manually. So when I do right click in here, we can whether add it to a different change list, or okay, it doesn't refresh for some reason. I really don't know why. Maybe because we have another git ignore in here. All right. Okay, so first I will copy this, and I will put it in here. So like in my git ignore file, and see if this now is considering the changes. So as you can see here, so it's ignoring all the IntelliJ thingies. But if it doesn't work, what we can do, we can whether not check it when we want to commit, or just try to ignore it. All right, so I will come back to this one later on. So now I just want to first, or like to have an initial commit for my resources. So what I want to do, I don't want to push this idea. So for the resources, maybe let's say, okay, let's leave this test for now. And also I want to push this game store API. All right, so here I will just initializing the API, or like the backend project. So this is gonna be my commit, or like my initial commit. So now when I click on commit, so continue, don't review issues. And here, by the way, when you click on this cog right here, okay, I don't know why it's showing this way. Maybe something's wrong with my display. But anyways, so for now I will try to keep an eye on this one so we don't push it, and also I will fix the git ignore file later on. So I just don't want to waste time on details like this. All right, so now our project is almost ready. So like we have everything. We set up our workspace, we created our backend project, and for the backend project now we can start implementing, or like we can start adding code. So here we have our application.yaml. We'll come back to this later on, but first of all I will start, or like I would like to start by implementing our entities in here. So as you can see here, we have a bunch of entities: user, game, wishlist, and so on and so forth. And for each one we would like to add the necessary, or the required fields, the relationships, and so forth. All right, so the first thing, or like the way I want to do things, is first creating all the classes without anything, just adding the classes. So now we will start by, for example, creating the user class, game request, wishlist, game, and so on and so forth. And then we start we will start adding the attributes, the annotations, the relationships, and so forth, until we are done with almost everything. All right, so the first thing, I will add a new class. And so here, before moving to creating the classes, how we will organize the code. So we have many approaches. So like whether we can create, or like we can organize them by layer. So for example, we will have a service layer, a data access layer, a web layer, and so on and so forth. And in each layer, we will put all the classes. All right, or we can divide them by, for example, like having a package for repositories, a package for services, a package for DTOs, a package for configuration, and so on and so forth. Or the best approach, or like my favorite approach, which I really recommend, is to use a domain organization. So this means each entity of my project, I will consider it as a domain. So I will have a user domain, a game request, a wish list, a game, and so on and so forth. So like each entity will have its own package, and inside that package I will put anything which is related to user, for example, like repositories, services, controllers, DTOs, and so forth. So like anything related to user will go under the user package. And why is that? So like, what is the advantage of using this approach? When the application grows, and if you have like a huge application with hundreds of entities, So searching by package is much easier and faster than searching by a class inside a package. So like imagine having an entities package with 100 entity, and then from the entities package you need to move and to find the dedicated repository or service for that one. So you need to jump to another package and so on and so forth. But if you have everything ordered and organized by domain, so like in one package you will have everything all together, but you can organize your code in the way that you want. Okay, so I will start by the user, and I will create a user class. So this is my user class, and as you can see here from the option that I checked before, so now the user class is automatically synchronized with Git. All right, so let's create the next class. So let's say, for example, notification, and it will go under notification. So here with IntelliJ, when you add something and then dot, so it will consider this one as a package, and then this is the class. So like it will create a package called notification, and inside that it will create a notification class. So this is what we see in here. All right, so like we have this notification, and then we have the notification class inside it. All right, so here we will have a game request. So another one. So let's call it game request dot game request. Then let's create a wish list, for example. So wish list package dot the wish list class. Okay, I typo, let's fix this one. And then let's create a game, the game class. So game dot game. And then we will have also the category. So category dot category, and then we will have comment. So it will be under comment dot comment. So now we have the comment class, and then I will for now I will just leave this email track and the email templates, because like even when we implemented the ERD diagram, or like the entity relationship diagram, we said that this email track, like it's already in a different color. We will implement it, we'll add them, but not for now. Let's focus on the core application, or the core functionality of our application, and then when it comes to the implementation of the notification system, we will also add this email tracking entities. All right, so now I can close all the tabs, starting from top to bottom maybe. So maybe let's start with category. So here I will just add a private string name. So here for the category, maybe we can have a name or even also like a description if you want to. So maybe let's add a description. So this is totally fine, or we can also remove it and leave just the name. So let's keep it for now. And now I will just use some annotations like a getter and a setter. I know that you might say we can use the data annotation. So like you mean like this one, this data annotation from Lombok. And now if I go to this annotation, click download source, and let's see what this annotation is. So this annotation, it's the equivalent of getter, setter, required args constructor, toString, and equals, and hash code. If you need all these annotations, so it's okay to use the data annotation, all right? But if you only need a getter and setter, all args constructor and no args constructor, just for example, there is no need to add this data annotation because it will include unnecessary annotations for you. But if you need that, it's totally fine to use the data instead. All right, but also you can, by the way, you can customize or like you can create a custom annotation that groups these annotations. So maybe I can show you how to do that. All right, so here what I will do is I will create an annotation. As you can see here, it's just an annotation, and I will create it in an annotations package. And here how to call that. So like this is the hardest part, is like finding a good name for a class or for an annotation. So maybe let's call it custom data, maybe something like that. All right, so now as you can see, it's a public interface, a public at interface custom data. So what I want to do in here, I want this annotation, so like I want to do something similar to this data annotation. All right, so I want it to be something similar to this one. So how to do it? So first I will add my getter, and I will add my setter. And here, of course, as we have in here, we need to add the target and the retention. So the target, so where this annotation applies. So it applies to a type, for example. So this means it applies only to a class. And the retention, so like when we want this this annotation to be executed. So let's add this one in here. And so here, getter. Okay, yep, all right. So I think we cannot do this because it only applies to field and type. And okay, so sorry for this one. I will just delete it and then we will come back. I will show you how to create custom annotations, but I think with Lombok this one will not work, because I think like the implementation of this annotation will not allow us to inherit from it. All right, so I will just delete this one, and then I can also delete this annotation package. So okay, sorry for that. Let's go back to this one. So if you need the data annotation, just use it. If you don't need all the annotations that are included inside the data, just use the specific ones. All right, so I will use also all args constructor and no args constructor, and then the builder I will add it just in few moments. So this is the category. Now let's move on to the comment. And just to make things a bit faster, I will just copy this one. All right, so here we will have the same annotations, and for a comment, what we will have? So we will have a private string, the comment itself, and I think that's it. All right, so let's move on to the next one. We have game. So I will add these annotations, and then for the game, we have a title, supported platforms, and a cover picture. All right, so we have a private string title. We will have a private, so for now I will make it as a string, and I will explain it in a second. Supported platforms, and then we will have a private string cover picture. So this is the definition of our game class or game entity. All right, so before moving, I want to clarify something in here. So for the supported platforms, how many platforms do we have? So as far as I know, I'm not a professional, I'm not a gamer at all. So like I used to be, but I'm not a gamer. But we have, for example, we have a PC, or like like a computer. We have, I think, Xbox. We have a PlayStation. And we have Nintendo, if I'm not wrong, plus other platform. All right, so here, since this list does not change, all right, like unless, for example, in the future we have a new console or something like that. Here, did we call it platforms, or okay, so I guess it's better to call it supported consoles. Okay, so let's keep it platform, so like it's totally fine. So here, since we have like a predefined list or predefined values of these supported platforms, so it's always better to go with an enum for this one, because first, like, we have control over the elements that we want to include, or like the supported platforms. And also we have another thing is, like, for example, we can avoid typos when it comes to typing, for example, the platform name from the user who, for example, who will add a new game. So for this one, I will create supported platforms. All right, so yeah, supported platforms. I will just take this once. Okay, so for these supported platforms, I will use the autocomplete, or like the support from IntelliJ, and here I will ask to create an enum called supported platforms. So it will be created in this destination package, which is com.alibu.store.game. So it will be created with game, since this enum is only used or like related to our game domain. So it's also fine to have it in the same package. So now when you have an enum, all right, so when you have an enum in an entity, so you need to use an annotation called enumerated. All right, so the enumerated class, so let's check it quickly. So it specifies that a persistent property or field should be persisted as enumerated type. So the enumerated annotation may be used in conjunction with basic annotation or conjunction with element collection, and so forth. So the most important here, so we have a type for the enumeration. So like it will be an ordinal type. So an ordinal type means that, for example, so this one will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so like when we create a game and we pass a value of a supported platform as, for example, if we choose PS, like PS for PlayStation, so I need to check if it starts from 1 or from 0, like the ordinal one as an integer. So I'm not sure whether it starts from 1 or 0, but I guess it starts from 1. So this means when, for example, when I want to create a new game and I pass the title, the supported platform, and the cover picture, so if this type is ordinal, which is the default value, okay? So if this enum type is ordinal, so it will give the PS the value 1. So like for the supported platforms, it will have the value 1, the value 2, sorry, not value 2, but the value 3, because this one is 1, 2, and 3. Like for PlayStation, it will be 3. But if I want to store it as it is, like this, like PS, PC, Xbox, Nintendo, and so forth. So maybe, yeah, Nintendo. So if I want, for example, to use it like as a full string, I need to change this one from enum type ordinal to string. All right. So here, as I mentioned, like persist enumerated type property or field as an integer, or it will persist it as a string. All right. Okay. So now we have our game entity ready. Now we are not done. So we have our game class, not the game entity. So we have only the game class now ready. Now let's move on and continue with the rest. And by the way, I will answer all your questions later on. So we are done with the category, game, and game request. So for the game request, we said that we can have a title and status. So in here, so we will have a private string title, and also we will have a private string status. So like the status of this game request, whether it's created, pending, requested, and so forth. All right, so for the status, in the same way, we will need let's say game request, or like just request status, like this, and let's create an enum for it, since we know all the statuses. So like, let's say, for example, okay, I guess I like the suggestion from IntelliJ: pending, approved, rejected, or cancelled. All right, so like we can whether approve it, or like it's gonna be by default pending, and then once the game is created, it will be approved. And for example, if two users, they request the game or like the same game, so it will be rejected, for example, or even cancelled. So like I think rejected and cancelled will be the same. So let's keep only 3 statuses in here. So when we go back to this game request, again we need to use the enumerated with the enum type string. All right, so now let's move to the next class, which is notification. So for this notification class as well, so like we will have this information. We will have a message receiver, the level, and the status. So here, by the way, like we can extend the fields or like the information of our entities in the future. So it's not, so like it's not 100% final. So we will have a private string. We said it's message, string message. We'll have a private string receiver. So like to whom we want to send this notification. We have a level. So we have a private string level, and we will have a private string status. So like the status means like whether if it's like a new notification or a notification that was read or like opened by the user. And the level, for example, if it's like a high, medium, or low. So for this one, let's say a notification level as an enum and notification status also as an enum. Let's create these two enums, and let's create this one, also create an enum. And here for the status, let's say new or also red, for example. Red, I'm not sure, like red, I mean like it was opened, or let's say opened. All right, so like opened from the user. And here, let's see, let's say the level. So the level in here, it will be low, medium, and high. All right, so let me format this one. So low, medium, or high. So like we can have, for example, notifications. So here, let's say seen. I just saw a comment from someone. So like this is the correct name. Thank you so much. So like whether it's a new notification or a seen notification. All right, so now we are done with the notification. Let's move to the user entity, or like the user class. Sorry, we are not talking about entities yet. So the user class. All right, so for the user, we will have a username. We don't care about the password. So we will have a private string first name. Okay, so the username, whether we choose a username or an email. So I will keep the email for now. So we have first name, last name, email, and password. So what do we have for the user here? We have the email and the role. So we don't have roles. So also we don't need the password. So we only need the first name, last name, email. And here I will also have a private string picture, or like profile picture URL. Profile picture URL. All right. Okay, so we have here profile picture URL. So now we are done with the user. And then we have a wish list. So the wish list, we mentioned that we will have here a one-to-one relationship with the user and many-to-many relationship with the game. So we don't have extra fields now. So like I will keep it for now as an empty class. I will not add anything, but we will come back to it later on. All right, so now what do we have? So here, now we just created the classes. Now I would like to transform all these classes to entities and establish the relationship between all of them, okay? So here, the first thing, what do we have? We have category, all right? So we have the category. So for the category, we will have something like this. So like we will have a long ID, or like whatever the type. So we will have an ID, and also we need to add an entity annotation in here. And for this entity annotation, we need to add the ID attribute. So like for each entity, we need to add an attribute called ID. And then let's say, for example, for the generated value, so like I want it to be generated. I don't want to care about it manually. So this field right here, also what we will have, so like we will have some auditing fields right here, like for example the creation date, created by, and so on and so forth. So like I will just leave them as a comment. So like in each class, or like in each entity, I will have this ID in here plus these auditing fields, and maybe I can have some extra common fields between all all the entities. All right. So here we have, for now we have, I guess, 5 or 6 entities. So for these 5 or 6 entities, I need to copy, paste, or like to duplicate this information in each entity. But what we can do, like we can use the power of OOP, or like object-oriented programming, and we can use inheritance. All right. So what I will do in here, I will create a class. I will call it, so I will create it in a package common, and I will call it, for example, base entity. All right. So I will call it just the base entity. So for this one, of course, I will have my getter, and I will have my setter, and I will have my all args constructor and no args constructor. And since this class, this base entity class, it's not an entity, but it's a class that will contain some information that will be inherited from a JPA entity. All right. So like they will be inherited from an entity class, not a classic class, but they will be inherited from an entity class. So here what I will do. So first, let me, oops, I think I have it in here. Nope. So I will add my ID annotation and then generated value. And let's say a private string ID. So like for the strings, we will be using ID. I will come to this generated value right now when it's a string, how we can auto-generate string IDs. So now this is a base entity that contains the information that I want to use in all the sub entities, or like the sub classes that will inherit from this base entity class. All right. So now all I need to do here is to extend my base entity class. Okay. But still, even if I have the ID annotation, I have the ID field in here, but now here the category is also claiming about having an ID attribute. Why? Because this base entity class is just a Java class. It's just a classic Java class. How to make this one a class that might be known from an entity that it contains information or fields used for this entity or any sub entities. So here we have an annotation. It is called mapped superclass. All right, so this mapped superclass, if we have a quick look on the documentation, so it designates a class, designates a class whose mapping information is applied to the entity that inherits from it. So this is the most important part. All right. So here, this is also very important. A mapped superclass has no separate table defined for it. So it's just here a class or a holder or a placeholder when we can put all the common information or the common fields that will be inherited from other entities. All right. So now if I go back to category, this error is gone, and now it recognized this base entity as a mapped superclass that contains my ID, and that might also contain any other extra fields. So like any field that I will add in this base entity, it will be inherited from the sub entities, and it will have it will add its own attribute into the database. So you need to pay attention to that. All right. So now we have all this. So what I will be doing, I will have first I will extend everything, or I will extend all the entities in here. So extends base entity. So base entity, and this one too extends base entity, and this one is an entity. The same for the game request. So extends base entity, and also this one is an entity. Let's move to the notification. Extends base entity, and then the entity annotation, and finally the user. So extends base entity. And for the wish list, as I mentioned, we will come back to it later on when we will implement the relationships. All right, so now we have all the annotations, okay? And then what do we need to, what do we need to do next? So for now, nothing is needed, but I just want to come back to this base entity and let's talk about this generated value. So here you might wonder why I chose string as an ID. So okay, so a long or an integer might be better in this case, but in this so here, just remember, we said that the user, or like this user information, they will come from keycloak. So keycloak stores the user information as strings, okay? And also we have here in our diagram, we have so many relationships with the user. So having the same type for all of them will make the indexing in the database much easier, and will make also the queries a little bit, not a little bit, but faster if we use the same ID for the different entities. So this is the reason behind choosing a string as an ID. So here also what I want to do, I want to choose a generator. All right, so like I want to use a generator for my ID. So like I want my ID to be a generated value. So here I will use a generator. And when we go to the documentation of the generator, so like here we have, sorry, not the generator, but the strategy. So, so for the strategy, we have a generation type. Okay, so it's of type generation type, and we have here a table sequence, identity, UUID, and auto. So like this auto one, this automatic generation type, so this means that the Spring Data JPA or Hibernate will get in touch with the database database management DBMS. Yeah, the database management system. Postgres SQL, for example, and it will ask him, or it will ask it for what is the best strategy for you that I can use to generate IDs. So for example, for Postgres SQL, the answer will be sequence. For MySQL, for example, it will be table strategy, and so on and so forth. So like it depends on the database system that we are using. Also, when we have strings, or like when we work with strings, and by the way, this is something new. I think it was introduced with Spring 3 point something. I really don't remember the exact version, but now we will use this universal unique ID. So like UUID is for universal unique ID. So let me type it in here. It's universal unique ID. So then what do we have in here? So just going back to this one, so like we will use UUID just to automatically generate. So like every time we want to insert or like to create a new line or a new row in a table, Spring or like Hibernate will use this generation to generate a new universal unique ID for our classes. So here let's use UUID as mentioned. And I can also keep this one in here just for you as a reference. And now we are done with the ID. So then after that, we will have here our auditing attributes. So for the auditing attributes, so like we need, so like also like we have this autocomplete by IntelliJ. I will add it, but for now I will comment it out because I want to explain it in details when we come to this part. So like I think it will be in the next session. So like I will just put it in here, but I will explain them, or like I will explain the auditing in detail in the next part. All right, so now we are almost done with creating the entities. So now we can move on to the relationships. All right, so we can move on to the relationships. So we will start by implementing the relationships one by one. We will start from the user as our central entity, and then we will move on. But before that, let me start my Docker. So I will just run my Docker, and I already have, so here, just a moment. All right. So now all I need to do, like what I need to do, is to have a database. All right. So I want to have a database so I can connect to it. I can create my tables and so forth. Okay. So I will be using Docker, as I mentioned. So now all I need to do first, sorry, like I should have done this from the beginning, but I totally forgot about it. But it's totally fine. We can do it now. So here I will create a docker-compose.yaml file. So this will contain all the services, and I mean by services, I mean containers. The containers that we will use for our application. So now I will just add services, and then we will start by Postgres SQL. So I will just call it so the first service. So this is the server, the service name. All right. So this is the service name. So it will be called Postgres SQL, and then I can add a container name. So I can give a name for my container. So I will call it Postgres Game Store API, for example, or like Game Store app, something like this. And then I will have an image. So from like, what is the image that I want to pull my my Postgres or like my container from? So it's gonna be Postgres. And here what I really recommend is always to give a version, or like to choose a version for your image, because for example, if you keep it like this, it will by default always pull the latest image. But sometimes, like from one version to another, sometimes they might introduce some breaking changes, and this might break your application. And when the application is broken, so like first you will invest an important time to investigate the problem, and of course you will start from the code. You will see what is wrong with the code, what went wrong, what was the changes and for example, if you are working on a new feature and you pushed some changes, and then like so for example, like you can spend some time debugging one way, but the problem is in a completely different way. All right, so like it's always good and a good approach to give your container a version. So here, for example, how to check for the latest version of a container. So what I do is I go to Docker Hub, and in here I just go to Docker Hub, and all I need to do is to search for the image that I want to use. So Postgres, let me zoom in, and here always try to go for the official images, unless you trust the creator of that image. So here, what you can use, or like what you can see like whether the recent tags, or like you can check the recent versions of the image that you want to use. All right. So here you can click on tags, and you will see the latest tags, and also like you will see if there are some vulnerabilities when you choose one of them, and so on and so forth. So like here you can have so many information. So now I guess we can see the version 13 as the last one. Yeah, so maybe let's take it from here. So overview. Where is the Alpine version? All right. So maybe we can use the version 17.2 point something. Let's see if we have it here. Okay, maybe we can use 17 Alpine, for example. Or if you want to use always the latest version, so it's totally fine, but it's up to you. As I mentioned, it is better not to do that. But for now, okay, I will just keep it as also like I will use the latest version, and then we will see if something changes. We can also roll back and specify the version. All right, so now I will specify some environment properties, or like some environment values. And for that, I want to use some Postgres underscore user. So like this will be the username. I will just call it username, and Postgres underscore password. And I will just give it a password as a password itself. And here there is another property which is called PG data or Postgres data. So this to specify the volume of the container. All right. So like this is where I want to store my data, or like the path to storing my data. So here, sorry, not the volume. The volume will define it in few moments. So for Postgres SQL, it's always /var/lib and then /Postgres SQL / data. So here. And finally, we have another property. So we have a property called Postgres DB. And then let's call it, for example, game store app DB. So this means, like this property right here means that when I start the application, or like when I spin up my container, I want automatically to create this database if it does not exist. So I don't want to create it manually. So like this is the environment, or like this environment property in here, and why it is used, or like what it is used for. So now also, if I want to have my data persisted, I need to attach or to link a volume. So here I will just call it Postgres, and then I want to have it under this one. All right. Like it should be the same as in here, /var/lib /Postgres SQL /data. So because this is where the Postgres SQL data is stored, and I want also to have a volume for that, so I don't, when I restart the container, I don't lose my data. So now let's add the volumes for that. So here I will just add the volume, and then I will give it the name, so Postgres SQL, and then I will give it a driver local. And that's it. So like this is how we create a volume, and now this is how we map this volume right here to this container in here. So now if everything is fine, I will open my terminal in here. So I'm directly under workspace, and all I need to do is docker compose so docker compose app. So I can use the option -d just to run it in a detached mode. So like my terminal gets released immediately, but I want to see if all the containers are up and running, and check that. All right. So here I think everything is getting created, and to make sure. So here what I can do, I can run the command docker ps. So the command docker ps is to see what are the containers that are running right now. So like I have this Postgres SQL container, which was created 18 seconds ago, and it's up 17 seconds ago. All right. So, and it's also running on the port 5432. So maybe what I will do, I will just stop the container. So now my container is stopped. And also I will just come back here and finish this configuration. So after the volumes, so Postgres SQL will automatically run on the port 5432. And so I will also expose this one. All right. So here I will add some ports, and I will expose 5432 over 5432. All right. Also, like if I have more containers and I want them to run all in the same network, we can also add the networks, but we will add it later on. So now I will just, again, the command docker compose app -d. Now I will just use the -d just to run it in a detached mode. So here, all right. So this port is already in use. So what I will do, I will open my dashboard in here, because I think I already have something already in use. I don't know which one. So let me stop this. Okay, so this one I can delete, and I guess this one also I can delete it. So I will just leave our workspace, or like our container. So again, let's run this docker compose app, and now we see it started. And also if I open again the dashboard, maybe I can zoom in so you can see better. So our Postgres SQL is connected. or like our container is up and ready. And now what I can do here inside database, I can click on add data source and I will choose Postgres SQL. So here, if you already selected a driver and if it requires update, you will see this update. Otherwise, you will have the option to download the driver. So just go ahead and click on download. So for my case, I will just update it. And here we have the information to connect to our Postgres SQL. So the host is localhost since it's running on our local machine. So this is the default port, also the one that we defined. And here all I need to do is to specify username and password as a username and password. So when I click test connection, if everything is fine, you will see this succeeded. And now we can apply and then OK. So now I will go ahead and display the schemas. So here you see that we have this game store app DB. All right. So this is the database that we chose to, or like that we asked our Docker container to create it when the container starts up. All right. So now I will just select the public schema from this game store app, and I will just remove the other. So I just want to see only my database. So for now, we don't have any tables. We don't have anything inside this public schema. So now the next step is, so like now we have our database up and ready. So the next step is I would like to add some configuration to my application in order to connect, or like to let my application connect to the database. Because for now, when I start the application, when I try to start the application, so here you need to enable the annotation processing because we have Lombok. All right, so here what do we have? So like failed to configure a data source URL attribute is not specified, and so on and so forth. So here what happened exactly, because this is very important. So you need to understand how the framework works, and then we can come back and finish the implementation. So this is much important. So what do we have here? So here we have this dependency Spring Boot Starter Data JPA. So this Spring Boot Starter Data JPA, so first of all, it's a Spring Boot Starter. So when we say a Spring Boot Starter, we are talking about a starter, or like a project that leverages the auto configuration. So here it will try to add, or like it will try to auto configure the data JPA part for our project. So Spring is a very smart framework, but like for some cases, it requires the minimum of information. So in this case, for example, Spring Data JPA, it needs the information about the database itself that needs to connect to. If we do not provide any information to this starter in here, or like this library in here, Spring Data JPA will not be able to connect to the database. All right, so that's why we need to provide some information in our application.yaml file, because when the application starts up, so at the startup of the application, one of the files that are automatically loaded into the context is the application.yaml file. So like Spring, first of all, it will read all the configurations from this YAML or properties file, and it will store it in the context. And then when the Spring Data Starter JPA starts doing the auto configuration, and when it needs, so as we saw in here, so when it tries to search or like to look for an attribute called URL, it will first start to read it from this application.yaml file. So if it doesn't find it, it will throw an exception, because in this case, as I mentioned, it needs to have an attribute called URL. So now I will add this one. So as I mentioned, it will be spring.datasource.url, and how to get the URL. So here from the database, when I do right click and then properties, you see something in here. All right. So like this is the URL that we will need to use in order to connect to our database. So I will copy it and paste it in here, but instead of Postgres SQL. So like this is a JDBC connection. And here, this is the type of the database management system that I'm using, which is Postgres SQL. So for example, if I'm using my SQL, I just need to use my SQL in here. or like Oracle or any other SGBD type, and then colon / and then I need to specify the URL or the location of my instance or of my database system. So here it's just localhost for this case, but for example, if it's running on a remote machine, so it can be, for example, the IP address for that machine. All right, and then colon, and then the port that is open to run the database. So let me bring back this one. So like localhost because it's my local machine, and then this is the port because I know from here that I configured my Postgres SQL on the port 5432. And then finally / the database name. So here I need to provide the database name. So the database name for our case is this game store app DB. So let me call it game store app DB. And then I need also, in order to to make it also easy for Spring Data JPA to connect to the database, I need to specify the username. So we also create it as a username and password as a password. So here there is an information. It's called driver class name. So the driver class name, it's optional. All right. So like this information is optional. So here I need to specify what is the driver that Spring Data JPA needs to use in order to connect to my database. So why this one is optional? So because, as I mentioned, Spring is a smart framework. So from the dependencies that we have in here, it will see that we have a dependency called Postgres SQL. So it will try to access the driver or to use the driver for that one, and it will use it as a database driver. All right, so like this is what we need to do, or like this is why I said that the driver class name is an optional one. All right, so okay, so now we need to add some other properties. So the properties that I want to add is first, like what is the data definition language, or like what I want to do at the startup of the application. So for that, I will add some jpa.hibernate.ddl auto. So for this one, we have 5 options. All right. So we have create. So create, it will create a schema and destroy the previous data. So every time I start the application, we will destroy the previous data or the existing data, and we will create the schema from, like, we will create a new schema. Create a drop, it's the same as create, plus it will stop, or like it will destroy the schema when we stop the container. None, it will do nothing. Update, it will try to update the schema if necessary. So like if we introduce some changes to the schema, it will try to update it. But here the update, we need to know something which is very important. So what is it? So for example, if I remove a field from an entity, so for example from here in the game or in any other entity, so for example if I decide to remove this attribute or to remove this field in here, and I have update in here, so like the field will not be removed from the database. So this is very important to know. Also, if I rename if I rename a field, so it will, like the update option, it will add a new field and it will not remove the old one. So like it will not perform a rename on this field. So it will create a new one because it will see that, for example, if I call this one title 11, so it will see that we don't have a field called title 11. So it will add a new field, but it does not know the previous state of the database. So it does not know that we already have a title and we want to rename it to title 11. So it will only add this one and keep the old field into the table. Right, so this is very important to know. Also, if I decide, as I mentioned, if I decide to delete this one, so it will not delete it. So it will, like the field, it will only be deleted from the class, but the field in the database will remain as it is. All right, and then we have the final option, which is validate. So the validate is the one that we will use when we finish the implementation of all the entities and the relationship, and if everything is completely fine for us, we will use the validate option. So the validate, what it does, so it will not introduce any changes on the schema, but it will validate the schema comparing to the entities that we defined in here, so like in the different classes, like including the relationships, the constraints, and so on and so forth. So it will just try to validate that. So here when we use validate, so for example, when I have a field, so for example this one is called title 11, but in the database it is called only title. When we try to start up the application, it will compare all the tables and all the relationships, the constraints, and so on and so forth. And if something is missing, so the application will not start. So like also the validate is the option that we need to use on production. So on production it should always be validate, but we also need to be careful when we introduce changes to our code. So now for the beginning, or like for the first state of our application, we will use a create or create drop. So because what I want to do, or like what I want to have, is every time I start the application, I want to delete the schema and create a new one. Or let's use a create drop instead. So once we finish, I want to delete the schema, and once we are done, and as I mentioned, we will be using a database migration tool like Flyway or Liquibase. So like we decided already for Flyway, and we will have the validate option, since this is the option that we need to use on production. All right, so let's continue with the properties that we need. So also I want, so like there is a property called show SQL. So whether it's true or false, so like when I run an SQL command, I want to show it or not. Also we have here some properties, and then we have hibernate, and then we have an option called format SQL. So we can set it to true. So like even the output, if this one is true, so the output will be formatted instead of having everything or like the full query in one line. So like this is important when we want to debug, or like when we want to see what are the queries that are being executed in our application. All right, so again we have here an information called database. So here we just need, or like it's important to give also an extra information to Spring Data JPA, which SGBD, or like which DBMS we are, SGBD, sorry, it's in French. So like which DBMS, or like database management system we are using. So it will try to convert, or like to create the correct and the dedicated queries for our DBMS. All right, so here we can also add a database platform. So for this one, just to specify the dialect that needs to be used for the database, or like to communicate with the database. So it will be org.hibernate.dialect, and then for Postgres SQL, it's Postgres SQL dialect. I think it's this way, but if we have a typo, the application will fail to start. So this is the configuration for our Spring Data JPA. All right, so like this is the configuration for that, and now all I need to do, or like what I can do, is to try to run the application and see if the database is getting created or not. So like I will start in debug mode. So as developers, as software engineers, always run the application in debug mode. So if something is wrong, you can see more details. All right. So here the first thing we have this syntax at or near error user. So like I will show you how I read the exceptions. So I will teach you how I read from the exceptions. All right, so this is the exception. So here we have info, we have warning, and here we have database, we have this information. So let me scroll down. So here what do we have? So we have a command acceptance exception, error execute in DDL. So drop table if exist user cascade via JDBC error. So here what do we have? We have a syntax error at or near user. So let's scroll a bit down and see what else, like what is extra, do we have extra information in here or not? So we have an error. So like this is the message that we saw together. And here, what is the problem? So like here, it's trying to create, like it succeeded to create the category table. And by the way, this is the two information, or like the two options that we set in here with show SQL true and also format SQL. So like, as you can see, the SQL is formatted. So create table comment, game, and so forth. But when it comes to the user, it throws an exception. All right. So it throws an exception saying that the user, like we have an issue creating the user. Let's try to scroll down if we see something else. So, but here I can give you the answer, because so like here, what I would do, like for example, like in this case, what I would do, I will copy this command and go to Google here. So the way I search for errors, so like Postgres SQL, since I'm doing Postgres SQL, and then I will paste the error. All right. So here I will try, for example, to go on Stack Overflow. Let me zoom in here. And now you will see that the word user is reserved as a word in Postgres SQL. All right. So the keyword user is a reserved word. So like I cannot use the keyword or like user as a table for when I use Postgres SQL. It might work for other database management systems, but for Postgres SQL, it will not work. So like for me, this is how I search. Also, you can go and check the official documentation and read directly from Postgres SQL, and also like from the forums from there. But like maybe catching or like going to the first link might give you a quick answer. But the most important thing is to know why you have this user. All right. So like you need to know why this like the database user or like the table user was not created. So now let's go back to our application, and here I will just go to user, and now to fix this one, I can use the table annotation. So the table annotation, let's call it maybe I would like to keep it as user, so I will call it just user. All right. So underscore user, or like you can call it user table, you can call it whatever you want. So here when we add this table annotation, so here we have the entity annotation. So the entity annotation will use the class name by default as the table name. But when we have the table annotation, it will ignore this class name, and it will use this name that we provided in here as a table name. So now I will try to run the application again and see if I am able to run the application and to create the database. So now the application has started and everything seems to be up and running, and I have all the tables being created. So I just need to go here and then click refresh, and I can check. All right. So here I have my user, category, comment, game request, and notification. All right, so now I have all the tables being created. For now, I do not have any relationship between the tables. So maybe let's go and check the columns. So here we have the ID, email, first name, last name. And we see, as you can see here, we have all the, like we always have this ID, which is inherited from this base entity class. If I add some attribute in here, so I will just say private string, something. I will just add an attribute called something, and I will stop the application and rerun it again. So I will regenerate the database. So that's why I'm showing you this, because you need to be careful when you add attributes to the base entity. All right. So now I will just refresh, and here we see that we have this something field in all the tables. All right, so like you need to be really careful when you add attributes in the base entity, because it will be propagated to all the entities. So let me rerun again the application. So we have kind of the final state of our database. All right, so now I guess the database now is looking good with all the properties and all the fields that we already defined. All right, so now I guess we will move to the Q&A session. So I will try to answer your questions, And okay, so like I plan to have the entity relationships with like within this session, but I really want to have a deep dive into the relationships and why, and like the impacts and the differences when using and annotations. And I want to explain to you so many things. And this will not this cannot be done in only 30 or 25 minutes. So let's move to our Q&A session, and then in the next session we will have a really deep dive into the relationship, and I will explain to you everything that you need to know and everything that you need to master when it comes to relationships between entities using the Spring Boot framework. All right, so prepare your questions. I will just now go through the chat, and I will try to read what you already posted. If I see some questions, I will try to answer them. Otherwise, you can prepare your questions, and I will answer all your questions right away. All right. Okay, I will start to read the questions and like what you mentioned. Okay, so here I will start with this first question. So, is there any difference between YAML with 3 letters and YAML with 4 letters? Really, there is no issue. There is no difference between YAML and YML. I think the YML was introduced because the Windows operating system does not, for file extensions, it does not accept 4 letters. So like it's funny, but this was the reason. Okay, so is it possible to use record for category? So like for entities, we need to use classes because we need constructors, we need getters and setters. We need the accessors, of course. So that's why we need to use entities. Okay, shouldn't we use list of supported platforms? So the answer is yes. I think I missed this one. Yeah, so we will discuss it. We will discuss it next in the next session. I think for the supported platforms, it needs to be a list, or we can also I can also show you a trick how to deal or how to handle this. All right, so it is not a confusion if the name of the table is the same as the name of its attribute, comment, and comment. I would say yes and no. So like having a comment table and a comment attribute, it should be fine, to be honest. Like I've seen this so many times and I use it so many times. So yeah, but if it causes a confusion for you, you can just try to find a better naming. So like naming is one of the biggest issues when it comes to adding classes or attributes or something like that. All right, so why string as ID and not long or UUID? So by the way, the UUID or the universal unique ID is of type string. All right, so that's why I chose string as an ID, and also as I told you, because the data or the user that we will get from Keycloak is of type string. Like the ID is of type string, and in order to make because we have the user entity related to or linked to many entities, just to make it easy for indexing and for searching in the database. So it's better to use the same type of IDs. Okay, the next question. So can we make the type of the ID generic? So for example, if we have IDs for different types like long and UUID, etc. So generic, so maybe this word is confusing me. Maybe I did not understand what you mean exactly. But of course, if you want, we can have IDs, different types of IDs in each table, but this really does not make sense. because when we want to do so for example, like imagine we have category, the ID of the category table is of type ID of type long, for example, and for example for the game is of a different type, and when you want, so for example, like to have a join query and so on and so forth, so like this you might find issues in there. Right. So how do you work with audit fields, created date, or like created ad, updated ad, and so on and so forth? So yeah, that's I was like, so as I mentioned, I want to have also like a dedicated part or like a dedicated time for this, just to explain to you how all this works, like the auditing part, how it works, why we need it, what are the tricks, and so on and so forth. So that's why I wanted to also to have it in separate. Well, to be honest, it will not be a full session, but at least a session dedicated to JPA auditing, where I can introduce and explain to you all this all together. Alright, so isn't it repetitive to have getter and setter in the superclass and in the child class? So the answer is no. Why? Because the parent class and the child class, or like the superclass and the child class, they are separate classes. All right. So, and in order to be able to access the data, we need accessors. Whether you need to make the fields public or protected, so they can be automatically accessed, or you need getters and setters for that one. And by default, and the recommendation, always the field should be private and it should be accessed only via getters and setters. All right, so when you set the identifier as auto-generated for the user class, how to manage the synchronization between the ID of the key clock users and those of the Spring app? Yes, this is a valid question. This is a good question. So yeah, so since the users they will not be created from, or like they will be created on the key clock side. So when we work with the unique or like with the UUID, or like the universal unique ID, when we pass a value, so for example, when we pass a value for the ID and this ID does not exist, so like it will be accepted from the database, or like from Spring Data JPA, and I will show you that when we try when we proceed, or like when we make some progress with the application. I will show you this part exactly. So I already have it in the plan. All right. I really like this question. Is it best practice to put the username password in YAML? So it's not the best practice at all, to be honest. So like because the code is synchronized, and this should not happen. Like you should not push credentials to GitHub, because this will be considered as a security leak. So instead, what we need to do, we need to set, or like we need to add or like to set environment variables, or to store these values into environment variables for our application. All right, so I will show you also the next time how we can use the .env file, or like how to set environment variables for our application. We can use users. Okay, so I guess we already solved that one. Yeah, so Sergey, yeah, like exactly. So like the underscore user will is already reserved by PostgreSQL, and I wanted to show you this exception, and I wanted to show you how I would solve it in that case. All right. So you have declare on the base class annotation like no args constructor, while you define it again in the entities. So as I mentioned, so like the classes are like separate objects, all right, and you need to treat them as separate objects. So like if you have inheritance, this does not mean that if you add an annotation in the parent class, this annotation will also be inherited. So the Lombok annotations, like the no args constructor, it will just create a constructor inside the class. All right, so it will not create a constructor for the subclass. So that's why we need to have the annotation on each class that we want to have a constructor in it. All right, so are we going to use Spring Active Profiles? Yes, we will use profiling. we will use Spring profiles, and I will show you like I will show you some tricks and some nice ways to use the profiles. I want to know the pro handle different profiles, dev prod, and test using environment variables. Yes, I can show you that. So like I can show you how to set the active profiles using environment variables. Yes, we will see a lot of things. So like the only thing I don't want to rush, I don't want to skip things. I want to deep dive into almost everything that we will see. And if I forget something, I really count on you just to remind me. Just drop a comment, or like while we are doing the live streaming, just send me in the chat so I will not forget anything. So but for me, the most important, I want to deep dive into everything. So that's why for today, when I saw like that we have only some time left, so I didn't want to start the relationship part, because I want to experiment so many things with you. I want to show you the difference between the different annotations and so on and so forth. And yeah, exact. Please press the like button. So like just hit the like button. Also share and invite your friends. And I'm still also waiting for your questions. Is everything clear? What about today's session? And also meanwhile, let me do something while we are still together. So let me go back in here. And of course, we need always to push the changes. So here, let's say creating the entities. So here, Spring data GPA, and here I will add some details. So some details for what we did. So setting or like creating or like setting up the project. Creating the entities, adding the Docker Compose file. So I hope this is setting up, creating the entities and adding the project. So let me commit and push and continue. Right. Yeah, commit anyway and push, and then push. Okay, so now everything should be in here. So if I refresh the code, so now you have this game store API, you have everything in here. And before I forget, I need to also move. So I need to close this one first so I can put it in the correct space. All right, so what I did is this one. So like I will also add it to Git, and then so add the draw.io file. So in here, before I push, so in here under the resources folder, you will see this game store design resources. So like where we have all the designs and also the future design. So like this is the application system design, and here this is the ERD or the database design, and we will have all the designs also in the future. So let me commit this one and push it, and then push. So now I can go back and continue answering your questions. All right. Okay, so yeah, do not rush. We need as much details as possible. So this is the goal. As I mentioned, like for me, it's not only about coding and just writing code, but for me, the most important is that you understand the details, you understand why it works and how it works. And because like when you are passing an interview and someone or like the interviewer asks you a question, you need to answer or to give him an answer and like explain that you are understanding things. You are not just memorizing or something like that. So I sent you an email and a text to Discord access. Okay, I will just do it after the stream. Once we are done, I will just add you to the group. Can I have the Discord invitation? I cannot exceed the Discord. Right, let me share the invitation even in here. One second, I will put the link, or like paste the link in the chat. All right. So I just pasted the Discord link. So first of all, try to join the server, and then whether send me a message on Discord or an email with your Discord ID, and I will add you directly to our private channel. Are we going to have regular session on Saturday? Yes, exactly. So like the sessions will be regular on Saturday, 8 p.m. So like EU time, or European time. Except if, for example, I don't know, like we have like some vacation or something like that where I will not be available, I will always try to notify you on Discord, and I will let you know in advance if we are if a session is not going to take place. Please. Yes. So like as I mentioned, it's one session per week. I missed the beginning. Yeah, so like just rewatch the video from the beginning and you will find all the details. So like the like once we are done, you will find the recording, or like you will find the recording in the playlist, and you can watch the video from the beginning, and you will get all the details. Okay, also as I mentioned, so I pasted the Discord link. So like this is the Discord link. Just join the server, and send me whether an invitation or a message on Discord or an email, and I will automatically add you to the private channel. So I really like the way you teach. I'm learning a lot of things. I really appreciate it. I'm really happy that you like my teaching, or like the way I teach and the way I explain things. So because this really counts for me. This really makes me happy. So yeah, please just go ahead if you have any questions or feedback about today's session. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you learn something new? Was it advanced? Was it beginner? Was it like from beginner to advanced, or like was it like how was today's session? So this is important for me, just to keep on improving for the next times. All right. So yeah. Again, I will just try to wait a few moments if you have any other comments or feedbacks. So I will need a command for JetBrains in the next 7 days. Okay, so yeah, so maybe for the new joiners, like the ones who did not join the bootcamp from the beginning, like in the first video, the first thing we did is I explained to you how to get your JetBrains, or like your IntelliJ coupon. So just try to watch it if you find it. Like otherwise, send me an email and I will send you the steps how to redeem your coupon code for 3 months free license for IntelliJ or any JetBrains product you want. Do you have any questions, any comments, any feedback, anything else? So if not, I would like to say thank you so much for joining today, and also like I would like to see 19 people liking the video. Just go ahead, hit the like button, just support this video, support me, and also invite your friends, share the bootcamp with your friends. If anyone is interested in joining us, please let him know, and share the video and the link to my channel with them. All right, so is there any video on your channel we can watch to prepare more future sessions? Yes, so the videos you can mainly watch first, like the ultimate course for Spring Boot, and the ultimate course for Spring Boot data JPA. So these 2 videos will help you a lot to follow or like to prepare for the future sessions. So these are really really important. I know like the 2 videos are 13 hours long, but I think I'm pretty sure they are worth watching. So try to follow on them. Okay, so some feedback. Just want to give a little feedback. I don't really think that detailed explanation in some parts are necessary. People who follow the course must be above a certain level, like creating GitHub repo. Okay, I agree with that. So this is perfectly acceptable as a feedback. But for me, I think if you are following me from quite some time, you know already my style. So okay, I know that the people who are assisting right now, they have a certain level, but trust me, I receive a lot of messages and emails and comments of people who are not even able to create or like to do a GitHub commit or GitHub push, or like even cloning a repo from GitHub. So that's why I try to cover almost everything from beginning, or like from beginners to advanced. So this is I will try not to focus too much on details or like on small details, but I would like to try to cover almost everything. So this is very important. But if everyone in here is or like agrees with this, so like I should not go into the details, so I can also try to skip the details for like for the unnecessary parts or like unnecessary details. But I just want to make it easy for everyone to be able to follow along for this bootcamp. All right, any other feedbacks? Like any feedback is welcome. Feel free to give any feedback. So like because this is gonna help a lot improve the bootcamp, improve the way I teach, the way I prepare, or like the way I present things. So this is very important for me and for everyone else. So all right, I guess I will just try to wait a few seconds. Okay, I see here a comment. So is it valuable to add a BFF layer for this project? Okay, so like this is an interesting point. Like BFF means backend for frontend, and backend for frontend is an approach where the API is only dedicated for frontend. So like we have a frontend and a backend that they work all together, but this API, for example, will not be exposed to any other resources or like third parties. But for me, what I really okay. So for me, I always think, or like I always have the mentality API first. So like I always consider and take into consideration that the API that I'm developing is not only used by a single front end, or like by a single user or a customer, but it might be exposed later on to more users, or like to more ends. So yeah, okay, but I will explain the BFF, or like why, for example, the needs or like the usages of a BFF. But it's not something special, or like it's not something exceptional that we need to look into really in details. Just having some endpoints dedicated only to that front end. All right. No, be quite early. I'm a senior and I'm there. Yeah, welcome with us. Okay, so from Arnaud, I think the details are necessary for future people who are going to join and are not advanced enough. So yeah, this is exactly the point. So like I want to make everyone be able to easily follow all the details of the bootcamp, even if they are not, as you mentioned, if they are not advanced enough. All right, guys. So thank you so much. If you don't have any other questions, so I would like to thank you so much and wish you a great start of a new week, and see you in the next weekend. So thank you so much, and have a nice week. Have a nice evening. Have a good night, and see you soon.